Hello, everyone. If you happen to be here, let me know. Oh. So as we have been doing for the past week, I might want one of you to be the class rep. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Hello? David? Okay, so first and first, Jane, do you mind being the class rep for us? And then secondly, I might have to take the class participation for today. So if you happen to have a Zoom account that is not in your true name, I will urge you to kindly type your name out for us to make you out, because I cannot read names that are not familiar to me or which I don't have record on file. So just type your name, your full name, and type yes attached to it. Your TA is in the room. He's going to copy all those who typed yes, and that will be part of your participation grade. So just type your name and type yes, and I'll start when everyone is ready. And please do it once. Please do it once. Yeah. Good. So if you're done, I'll just start with today's discussion. I'm just gonna tell you guys what today is about. And again, Jane, you happen to be our class rep for today. Can you read that? Hello, Jane. Yeah, Jane Pereira. Can you speak out? Do you have a microphone?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, Jane.
Okay, excellent.
What do you go by? What name do you go by?
Oh, sorry, it's just John or John Luke.
John
Either
Luke.
or is fine.
Okay, then. John, if you happen to see any question during the discussion, if you have a question, just draw my attention, and I might have to go to you direct if there is anyone in the chat room who has a question. Is that okay with you?
Okay, sounds good.
Sure. Good. Is it the same John I taught last semester?
Yes, in 392.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Okay, so this will be today's discussion. Basically, you're going to go through labor supply and labor demand. It's going to be a bit mathematical, so please pay attention. And I might have to come in again and do a second roll call to get the full mark. So for now, what you have is 50% of today's participation just by coming in and typing yes. I will also have to come in and do a random call for you guys to type yes again, just to make sure everyone is following. Today's discussion is going to capture labor supply and labor demand. What we did in the previous week was just measurement. Today, we are going to try to build up on that and have what we call an actual model. So we are going to move away from measurement to models to understand how individuals do behave in an economy. So to start with, I would like to remind you guys of what we did last week in terms of the players in the economy. So last week, remember, we have 3 players in the economy. We have a consumer or the household who make decisions as to whether to go and work. And when they work, they get paid wages. They also make decisions as to whether to consume or not to consume and whatnot. These are the guys that we call consumers. And today they are going to feature more in our discussion. The second players we have in the economy happen to be firm. Firm are those who basically produce what we consume in the economy. And one important thing here is that these guys are basically labor demand guys. They are always looking for people to come and work for them. So basically the firms in the economy are those who are demanding labor, while the household or the consumers or the individuals in the economy are those that give us the labor supply. So basically we have our labor supply and our labor demand. Labor supply from the household, labor demand from the firm. So this is where we have the whole idea of the labor supply and labor demand chapter. And the last part of the players in the economy happens to be the government. And the government here, basically what it does is it basically takes away the taxes from us. So here, what we have here is a T, the taxes that the government tends to take away from us. So that's a whole idea about the players in the economy and how they are going to feature in this model, especially in this particular chapter. Moving from there, we now have to concentrate on one particular player who is basically the consumer. Remember, this is the consumer. We are going to feature more about him this week. And so on Thursday, we're going to talk about the firm and merge the two together. The consumer basically is someone who gives us the labor. So we have the labor supply. But before we go ahead and understand the consumer better, there's a need for us to understand what we call representative. So in every economy, there are several types of consumers. We have a consumer who might want to consume coffee in the morning and perhaps pizza in the afternoon. You have another consumer who might also prefer to consume pizza in the morning and coffee in the afternoon. So it's very hard for us to find someone who will represent the whole consumer market in the economy. So what macroeconomists do is they basically have this whole idea of representative. Why not just use someone who is more or less like representing everyone in the economy? So that's the whole idea of the representative. He's going to stand in for everyone in the economy. We have what we call a bundle. A bundle is basically how much you want of one good and the other. And I'll come in and talk about that briefly shortly. Then we have what we call the property of the IC curve. So whenever you hear me mention IC in this course, it basically means indifference curve. So we have to talk about the properties of the indifference curve. There are 3 major properties of the indifference curve. The first idea is that more is always preferred to less. You prefer more goods compared to less goods. Diversity. You prefer to have 10 apples and 10 oranges rather than having 20 apples and 0 oranges. So that's the whole idea of diversity. And lastly, we have the whole idea of a normal good. A normal good is as your income increases, you want more of it. So these are the 3 major properties of the indifference curve that I would like you guys to pay attention to. Now, in terms of drawing the indifference curve, there are 2 things that come to play. First of all, it is convex towards the origin and is downward sloping. So these two properties you have to keep in mind whenever you are drawing the indifference curve. And lastly, you also have to understand the whole idea of marginal rate of substitution, how much you are willing to exchange one good for the other. So these are the key points under the indifference curve chapter or sub-chapter. Then we'll move on to the fourth idea in the book, which is the budget constraint. There are three things I would like you guys to look at. First of all, the time constraint, which I'll just motivate by looking at the time constraint. Then we'll have to look at the actual constraint in terms of the whole budget. Then we have to look at the two types of constraint that comes to play. Whenever the profit, so whenever you see this guy in this course, pi, it means profit. The profit by the firm. And whenever you see T, it means taxes. So these two things will tend to affect your budget in one way or the other in terms of how to draw it and how not to draw it. So we'll come to that under the budget constraint. And lastly, in terms of the changes as to whether you have the pi being greater than the taxes or not, you have to look at how the dynamics works. And in terms of the weight changes, you have to look at how the weight changes tends to affect your decision. So this is what we call the income constraint or the income effect and substitution effect. So whenever you see IE, it means the income effect, and whenever you see XE, it means the substitution effect. So these are the key points for this first part of the chapter. And if you want to read the book and you are struggling as to what to pay attention on and what not to pay attention on, I believe this should help you guide in terms of your reading. Is there anyone with any question as to the outline? Any question in the chat room?
Not at the moment.
Good. So if no one has any question as of now, then I'll quickly move on to the representative agent and see how it works and all that. And again, feel free to ask questions if you have any. So if you have chapter, I believe it's supposed to be chapter 4, you can have a look at it. And those who are struggling as to which book to use, I said either chapter 4, chapter 5, or chapter 6, or version 4, 5, or 6 should work for you. Feel free to have a look at them. So today I realize the class is around 45, and if it is to be 45 or more, then obviously your final exam will not be comprehensive. It will just cover what we did after the midterm. So where should we start from? Why not start from the representative agent? We start with the representative agent and see how it works out. Some of the key concepts in there. The first concept here is representative, and I think I made mention of that. So if you have someone who is more or less like representing everyone in the economy, we just use that person as our representative agent. The second most important thing I would like you guys to pay attention to on this guy here is the bundle. What do we mean by bundle? Instead of using apples and oranges, because we find ourselves in the labor supply and labor demand markets, the most important thing we need to use here is your leisure, how much you expect to sleep or go to the beach or what's not, versus your consumption. How much you decide to consume. So these are the two key things that we'll have in your bundle. So for any bundle that you have, it might be the case that you have 24 hours in a day. Bundle 1, someone might decide to work for 8 hours and have leisure for the rest of the 24 hours. So that means he has somewhere around 16 hours to rest for leisure. And then in terms of consumption, he might want to consume maybe 8 oranges or something like that. This is considered as a bundle. Within this bundle, you have your leisure and you have your consumption. This is called bundle 1. Someone might also go with another bundle. Basically goes like, hey, I prefer to have 24 hours in a day, sleep as much as I can, work 0 hours and consume 0. This is also considered as another bundle. Someone might also go with another bundle, which is bundle 3. Why not go with 0 sleep, and for the rest of the 24 hours, work 24 hours, produce 24 oranges and consume them. So these 3 different bundles can represent how a person would like to behave in an economy. So this is what we mean by bundles. Whenever you hear me say bundle, it means a combination of leisure and consumption in this chapter. Leisure and consumption within your books, how much you would like to have each and every one of them. Is there anyone with any question?
No, sir. Oh, yes. One person asks, is consumption measured in terms of hours?
It depends. So it depends on the productivity. So that's a very good question. So if you have, I think we'll count to the frames in terms of the consumption. But for now, let's assume that for every hour that you work, you can get 1 apple, right? So that in itself will represent the consumption that you have. But I'll come back and motivate in terms of the budget constraint so that you guys see clearly where the consumption is coming from based on the amount of hours that you decided to allocate on consumption and on sleep. Is that okay? Is it okay?
Yes,
okay.
Seems so.
So we'll come back to how consumption really plays a role and how to capture that. So having said that, we will have to now move on to the second idea under the representative consumer, which I have here to be the properties. So out of the properties that we have is always the idea that the properties for the indifference curve and the fact that we have a consumer, we always believe that more is preferred to less. The more food, the more rest that you have, the better. So more preferred to less. We also have this whole idea of diversity. You wouldn't want to have a situation where you sleep 24 hours, work 0 hours, and in this chapter, if we work 0, you don't have anything to consume, right? So I think coming back to the person's question, if you decide to sleep for 24 hours, it means you are not working. And if you are not working, then you don't have anything to consume. There's no food for the lazy man in this economy. Again, we have to come back and justify that and make some changes to that. So diversity is the whole idea that you would like to prefer an equal amount or basically a fair distribution of each in the bundle. And lastly, we also have the whole idea that as your income increases, you consume more of that particular good. And that's the whole idea of normal good. And normal good is basically a good that increases as your income increases. You increase the consumption of it. So these are the 3 key properties that you have to understand under the representation of an agent in terms of its preferences and all that. Is there anyone with any question?
No, sir.
Good. So having said that, we now move on to understanding the nature of your indifference curve. And I believe you might have come across it in your previous chapters, but it's very important for us to revise it quite briefly. So this is how your indifference curve is going to look like. Remember, we have leisure here, and then we have consumption here, okay? This is how your indifference curve is going to look like. First of all, it is convex towards the origin, and secondly, it is downward sloping. These 2 things I would like you guys to read on and understand it properly as you go through the chapter. One of the key important things that you need to understand here is the marginal rate of substitution and then diminishing marginal rate of substitution. That more or less captures the nature of this indifference curve. Let's give an example. Why is this indifference curve looking this way? Basically, it is downward sloping because the more you get of one, the less you get of the other. If you decide to work for 2 hours in a day, you get more sleep. So if you work for only 2 hours in a day, you get more sleep. So the less you get of one, the more you get of the other. However, if you decide to work for 20 hours so that your consumption increases, then basically what it implies is that you would have to sleep less. So there's a negative relationship between the two. The more you get of one, the less you get of the other. That tells us the negative relationship between the two. So this is fairly obvious. The difficult one here is the whole idea of diminishing marginal rates of substitution. So let's give an example. Let's motivate it with one particular example. Let's imagine you have an individual. Let's take the bundle again. Let's take apples and oranges, just to make things very simple. I have apples here. I have oranges here. Let's imagine you have 100 oranges and 0 apples. And let's take this guy here to the apples, and let's take this guy to the oranges. The intuition here is that because you have more oranges and 0 oranges, 0 oranges and more apples, due to diversity, you are always willing to have a fair amount of the oranges as well. So if I'm to come to you and ask you, hey, I have oranges, are you willing to trade part of your apples with me? You go like, yes, because you don't have the oranges. So the first apple that you give out, let's take it, you give out 10 apples and you are willing to receive only 2 oranges. So that's the first part. This part of it, you are willing to give out more of the apples for less of the oranges because at that point you had no oranges. If you happen to come to a situation where you now have only 10 oranges and only 10 apples and 90 oranges, which is somewhere around this point. The intuition here is that now you wouldn't be willing to give out more. Have a look at this. The same 10 oranges. You now want to get somewhere around 20 oranges for the same 10 apples. The same gap for each, but the substitution is different. Here, you give out 10 oranges and you are willing to get 2 oranges. You give up 10 apples and you are willing to get 2 oranges. Here, you give up 10 apples, but you are willing to receive 20 oranges. So that's the whole idea of diminishing marginal rate of substitution. The more you have of one thing, the less the price you would like to get for the other. However, as your quantity reduces, then you now are willing to get more of the other before you trade. So that's the whole idea of the diminishing marginal rate of substitution, as you see the graph. Is there anyone with any question on this? Any question in the chat room? It might be a bit confusing.
As of right now.
All good?
Yes.
Let me see. I think someone might have sent a mail, so let me check out. Okay, so if everyone is watching, then we can now move on to the idea. So just keep in mind, whenever we talk about the marginal rate of substitution, this should always come. First of all, the individual would like to diversify, but his willingness to diversify depends on how much he has at that point. And that's where the diminishing marginal rate of substitution comes in. Having said that, I think that will be all about the indifference curve. And I think the previous courses might have taken you guys through indifference curve, so that should be fine as well. Now, this is where the true action begins in this chapter, the math in terms of the budget constraint. So let's start with the budget constraint. There are two types of budget constraint, which I will look at. But for now, I'll start by motivating it by looking at the time constraint. And to the student who asks about the consumption, you'll see it coming out here clearly, much clearer. Let's have a look at the time constraint. We believe that every individual in an economy has 24 hours. Let's take it, 24 hours or so. Out of these 24 hours, you decide to sleep or have leisure, plus part of it is to work. And that will add up to the 24 hours that we have in an economy. So for this chapter, the 24 hours is what we represent by H. The hours that you tend to work is what we call labor supply. Remember, we are dealing with the representative agent, and the agent in this economy is coming from the household, and he supplies labor. So that's why you see NS, which means labor supply, or the amount of hours that he supplied to work. And we have leisure, which is your L. So this is your time constraint that we have in every economy. Out of this time constraint, you might want to play around with it and tell us that, hey, this is your the total number of 24 hours that you have, which is your H, minus the leisure that you have, which is your L. And this guy here is going to be the amount of hours that you work. So you can redefine the labor supply as a difference between the 24 hours minus how much you decided to sleep, which will end up being your labor supply. Now, the question here is coming back to what you guys asked as to what the consumption is going to be. We believe that if you work in an economy, you get paid wage. So for every hour that you work, you get paid a wage of W. So if you work for NS hours, you get paid a wage of WS. W represents the wage that you get paid. And the number of hours is, so for instance, for every hour, you get paid W. So if you work NS hours, you get paid W multiplied by the hours. The same thing applies to this side. Because it's the same equation, I can multiply this guy by W. And this guy here is what we call your labor income. Right? This is your labor income. When you multiply the wage by the total amount of hours that you work, you get your labor income. Is there any question here? So this is the first part of the motivation. Now we understand what a labor income is. The next question here is, we believe that in this economy, I think I should have mentioned that earlier, we are only in one period. Static economy. That is to say, you don't live for tomorrow, you just live from hand to mouth, you just live for today and you're going to die after today. So there's not going to be savings, there's not going to be anything. Everything that you get paid is what you consume, okay? So if you go to the apple shop, or sorry, when you go to the apple farm and you work for 24 hours and the owner of the farm says that for every hour that you work, I'm going to pay you one apple. All the 24 apples that you're going to get, you're going to consume that. You're going to consume them today. So it's just going to be one period or static model. There's not going to be saving. So now that we understand what the income of the individual is, which is just W multiplied by S, we can go ahead and do much more stuff to it. So how much will an individual consume in an economy? An individual, as I pointed out earlier, he just lives for one period and his consumption is just going to come from what he gets. Do we now see where the C comes in? Look, is it clear? Do we now get where the C is coming in from?
Yes, sir, I think so.
Yeah, so you get paid this much and you just consume it, which is your C. So let's further break this guy down. Is it safe for me to say then my C will just be C equals, instead of writing this, I can replace them with this, W multiplied by H minus W multiplied by L. I'm just replacing this guy with this guy, which is a further breakdown in this form. So this is your consumption. And for the sake of consistency, your C, leisure, is also defined to be something that you consume. So your C plus your WL, which is your leisure, will now be WH. Is it clear, anyone, everyone? So using the time constraint, we've been able to get to your budget constraint. This is your budget constraint. What you consume in terms of food plus what you consume in terms of leisure equals what you have in the entire duration for the day multiplied by the wage. Now, this is where it might get a bit tricky.
Oh,
remember,
we do have a question.
Sure.
Somebody asks, what is WH?
WH, remember, H represents 24 hours in a day, right? That's your H. And WH represents the total amount of income that you would have gotten have you decided not to sleep. If you spend 24 hours working, you get H. And for every H hour, you get W. So W multiplied by H is the total income that you might have gotten during the day. Is that clear? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Good. Now remember the players we have in the economy, right? We have these players in the economy. The three players. We have you as a household. We have the firm, and we have the government, right? So all what we did right now is to talk about you as a household, what you did. But the question here is, if you have a government playing a role or government in the economy, the government will always want to take taxes away from you. So out of the total income that you might have gotten during the day, you have to account for the fact that the government might take taxes away from you, which is big T. This is more or less like a lump sum. If it happens to be a unit tax, we'll talk about it. But for now, let's assume that this is a lump sum tax. Is that clear for everyone? So minus T for the lump sum taxes. And the firm, remember the firm produces, and it's possible that a firm might come up with a profit. And whenever a firm comes up with a profit, the profit goes back to the household, because we assume that the household is the one that owns the firm. Or put it in another way, the household rents capital to the firm. So the profit will come to the household. If that is the case, this profit, which we call pi from our introduction, will have to be added to the budget. So your entire income as an individual will not only be coming from the work that you have done, but it will also be coming from the fact that you might have profits, maybe an investment that you have somewhere, minus the fact that the government will come in and take away the taxes away from you. So this side becomes the income side or the net income side, and this side becomes the consumption side or the expenditure side. And the two will turn out to balance each other off. So this here becomes the budget constraint of the individual. And this is going to be very important. So I'm going to stop here. Ask me any question you have before I move along with the discussion. This is the budget constraint of the individual. If you have any question, please ask before we go and break it further down. Let me know if you have questions.
So one person asks, how to understand the left part as consumed side? What does WL mean? Or
yeah, that's a question. Imagine, right? Imagine that we need to motivate his question with the whole idea of opportunity cost, right? So you have 24 hours to work in a day. You can decide to go in and work for 24 hours and you have maybe $24. But if you decide not to work, the opportunity cost of you not working is the income you might have gotten from working. Do we get it? So if, for instance, I have 24 hours in a day, I decide to work for 16 hours, I forgo $8, right? This $8 would have been an income that I would have gotten. And the fact that you are foregoing it means that you are now changing the work to buy leisure with it, right? We are changing work to buy leisure. So we are now consuming leisure instead of work. So leisure becomes an expenditure. Is it clear? Yeah, so we are now consuming like going to the holidays, going somewhere to have fun, have some rest and all that. These are all the leisure that we consume. It's captured somewhere here. There's opportunity cost for we not working. And we have to pay it one way or the other. If you think of it in terms of opportunity cost, and if you want to think of it in terms of a usual everyday life, the holidays that you go for in Hawaii and what's not, you pay for it. It's part of your consumption. Is that okay? John, is there any other?
Yes, we have another question. So the individual has wage income plus the profit of the firm, and can WL be called the value of leisure?
It has a value of leisure that you pay for, right? You only have it after paying for it. You can value it, but you wouldn't go for it. But if you value it and you go for it, then you have consumed it. It's part of what you've gotten. Is that okay? Is there any other question?
No, sir.
Sure. Okay, so that will be it for now in terms of this guy. So I'm going to use this guy to draw a graph, and this is where it's going to get a bit tricky. So just make sure you understand and stop me whenever it's a bit confusing. To draw this graph, I'll motivate it with the usual graphs that we have in high school. So just make sure you remember your high school graphs, and this is where it might come in handy. High school graph. Y equals mx plus c. C is a constant. M is a slope. X is the x variable. Y is a y variable. So if someone asks me to draw this guy, first thing first, I put x here, I put y here. The first question I would like to plot is, I ask myself, what will be the value of y when x is 0? The value of y when x is 0 is just going to be c, right? So at this point when x equals 0, the value of y is just going to be c. So I put c here. The second question I asked myself is, what will be the value of x when y is 0? And that will be anywhere on this line. When y equals 0, what will be the value of x? Anyone to help me? X is going to be this guy, c or minus c over M. Is that correct? John, is that correct? It's just going to be minus C over M. If it's not correct, question.
Yes, I think that's correct.
So these 2 points here, this is the first point, this is the other point. So the 2 here will help me get this line when I plot this guy. So that's the first part. Now the second part is, what will be the slope of this line? The slope of this line is basically going to be dy dx. The change in y due to change in x, which is just going to be m. So that's just going to be this guy here, the absolute value of this guy, m. So that's the slope. And this is going to be very important. Anything that we did now, I'm now going to put it back in terms of what we saw from the budget constraint. So remember, I'm going to keep this guy here, and I'm going to refer you guys back to what we just did. Remember, from our budget constraint, we had C, right? Can someone remind me of what the variables were? C plus WL equals WH, right? Minus T plus pi. But remember, for this question, our Y is just going to be C. Our X is going to be leisure. These are the bundles that we have, C and leisure. So C is here, L is here. And because of that, I might want to break it further down and define it as WH minus WL minus T plus pi. I'm just moving the WL to this side. So this C is my Y. This L is my X. Everything else is considered as my constant. So if that's the case, let's try and draw the graph again, given these variables. I have this guy here, I have this guy there. I have my leisure here, I have my consumption here. The first question is, what will be the value of my consumption when leisure is 0? Remember, at this point in time, my leisure will be 0. So I ask myself, what will be the value of my consumption when leisure is 0? This guy goes to 0, everything else remains in the economy. So it's just going to be at this point is going to be WH minus T plus pi. So that will be the point where leisure is 0. Is that okay with everyone? No question, John?
No questions.
Good. At this point, I ask myself the same question. What will be the value of L when C is 0? I go here, I put 0 here. It means everything comes to this side. When this guy is 0, I have 0 here. I have WH minus WL minus T plus pi. I just need L. So I make L the subject of the equation. So this guy comes T minus pi minus WH equals minus W over L. Divide them by W to get my L standing on this side. So this now becomes a value of my L when C is 0. So this guy is the value of my L when C is 0. It might have to be somewhere here. So I have the first point, I have the second point. I draw the two together. I now have the budget constraint on the graph. So this is not going to be difficult if you only understand this equation from high school. Your C is your Y, your X is your L. Use the same intuition, you will get the same graph. Now that we have this graph, what we have to do here is to plot the indifference curve. Remember the indifference curve that we had earlier from today's discussion is just going to be somewhere here. At the point where it is tangent, so this is my IC, which represents my indifference curve. This is my budget constraint. And the point where the two of them do meet becomes the point where I make the decision. So this becomes my best bundle, C star, L star. That's the best bundle I would like to have. So the bundle here, C star, L star is the best. Is there anyone with any questions?
Not at the moment.
No question?
Not as of right now, no.
Okay, good. So let me quickly check. Let's quickly do a roll call right now. Type your name and type yes. And I'll just finish in 7 minutes. So type your name, type yes. That will be the second roll call for today, and I'll update the records. So now that we have this, if everyone is fine, then we can now go ahead and look at the two types of graphs that we will be encountering. Two types of graphs that we might be encountering here. So because your quiz is going to be on Thursday, please come prepared. What I would like you guys to read on is chapter 1 and 2, not this chapter. Just 1 and 2 should be fine. So let's see the types of graphs that we have. So the types. There are two types of graphs. The first one is a situation where t is greater than pi. And the second one is a situation where t is less than pi. This is a situation where taxes that are taken away from you happens to be higher than the profit that you would have gotten. So if I'm to draw this guy again, now my belief is that everyone understands. This is the leisure, this is the consumption. The question here is, if I decide to have 24 hours of leisure, will I consume anything? If I decide to sleep the whole day, will I consume anything? That's the question. Will I be able to feed myself? Yes or no?
No, right?
Yes or okay, no, right? Because I decide to have leisure for 24 hours, it means I will not be able to feed myself. So the highest I have here in terms of consumption is 0. And if I decide to work 24 hours, this is how much I have. So this is going to be the graph. And this is the graph which is consistent with this. Because you don't have any profit anywhere, even if you are to have profits, because the taxes that are being taken away from you happens to be higher than the profit, you for sure consume 0. Now the next question is, if you decide to sleep the whole day, but you know for sure you have a company that gives you profits, and this profit that the company gives you happens to be higher than the taxes that is being taken away from you, would you have something to consume? I have an individual who doesn't work, but he has a lot of money in the bank. And even if the government is to come in and tax those monies, he still has something left. The question is, will this individual consume in the economy? Is he able to feed himself, yes or no? Anyone?
Yes.
Yes, right? So this means that we cannot put that individual at the point 0 for his consumption, right? We need to modify his graph. With this individual, we cannot put him here. When you put him here, we are basically saying that he's going to consume 0, which is not true. It's false. So there's a need for us to extend this graph for it to have a kink. So no more 0, he still has some possibility to consume, even if he's to work 0 hours. So even if he is to have leisure for 24 hours, he still has the difference between his profit, which is pi, minus the taxes that are being taken away from him. And this is going to be positive, which is C. So he still consumes something, which is positive, instead of just saying 0. So this will be A, and this will be B. So for this course, we are going to stick with this graph. And please again, let me know if the intuition is not clear, because it might be difficult. This guy is not consuming zero, even if he's to have 24 hours, because he still has some net profit to feed himself, which is non-negative or non-zero. So I'll have to stop here. So for this course and for the subsequent chapters, we're going to stick with this guy. And that's why we have this graph. Questions? If there are no questions, yeah, so for the B part again, remember, this guy here, this is you deciding to have leisure for 24 hours. You just going to sleep 24 hours without working. And what we said here is that if you don't have any profits anywhere, and even if you are to have profit and the taxes are higher than the profit, your consumption is just going to be zero, because you wouldn't be able to feed yourself. Now, if I have an individual who has profits in the bank, maybe a profit of 100, and the taxes that is being taken away from him is 50, his net profit is going to be 50, right? Now, the question here is, if he decides not to work, 0 hours, nothing, he's just not going to work, he's just going to sleep the whole day. Can he feed himself? And I'm saying here, yes, he can feed himself from this net profit that he has accumulated. He's sure that he has $50 in the bank account. So he's sure that he's going to feed himself. So if you are to come here and then say that his consumption is going to be zero, you are wrong, because you've not considered the fact that he can still feed himself with the $50 that he had in the account. So instead of writing zero here, at the point of 24, we are no longer going to write zero, we are going to write 50, which is basically going to be the difference between his pi and t. And because this guy is 50, it means there's going to be a certain zero somewhere, maybe somewhere here to be zero. But we cannot go past 24 hours. 24 hours is the maximum hours that we have in a day, so there's a limit. So that's why this guy is a king. 50, 24 hours the limit, we have a king. Questions, Luke?
No, seems very clear.
Okay, good. So Thursday, I'll meet you guys. The attendance today is encouraging. Hopefully Thursday you have your first quiz. And if you have to have any question, just let me know. For my office hours, I try sending out a survey to see where you guys are coming from. I think just a few of you responded, and given that response, it means everyone is in Canada. And if that was the case, I'll send you guys my office hours very soon. And if you are to have any trouble with the reading, let me know. So next week, this Thursday, what we'll be doing is extend this graph to cover income effects and substitution effects and cover the decision by the firm, and that will end it. See you guys next week. And sorry that I took much time. Send me a request if you want the recording, and I'll send it to you guys. Okay, thank you very much, guys, and see you next week.
Yeah, dog.
Yeah. I was going to say, I won't buy it.
Bye-bye.
Oh, okay. So who office hours is here?
Well, office hours 11:30 to me joining. Maybe.
As I think money hall.
Yeah, me could be.
See you.
Okay.
Now update my quick here for the same.
Christopher.
Yeah, who we are. So
Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah.